The world is sinking, but Africa is rising. It's time for Africa to turn the tide of political conflict, economic uncertainty, and moral decadence. The time is now for Africa to arise and rebuild. Inspire E-Conference 2023 will give you the tools and strategies to be part of Africa's rebuild. Join us online this August from Monday the 7th to Saturday the 12th from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. East African time as we gather the brightest minds across the continent to discuss the rebuilding of Africa. Book your slot today and be part of the movement that will change Africa forever. Africa, arise and build.
I would like to invite our first panelist for the day. I'm going to introduce the panelists that we have, and then I will request one of them to speak. So I'll introduce both of them, and then they'll have some time to speak individually for a few minutes and share with us their perspectives regarding building appropriate governance and leadership to take Africa forward. So our first panelist is the Executive Director and a board member of the Uganda National Roads Authority, UNRA, a position that she has held since May 2015. So UNRA is responsible for development and maintenance of the national network of roads that provide access to primary growth areas of the country, as well as provide connectivity with the East African region. So Allen was previously the Commissioner General and board member of the Uganda Revenue Authority from 2004 to 2014. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology of Magara University, a master's degree in public administration from the University of Liverpool, United Kingdom, and a master's degree in organizational leadership and management from Uganda Christian University. So that is our first panelist. Our second panelist is Dr. James Magara. And Dr. James Magara is a highly regarded voice in leadership in Uganda and beyond. He's a futurist and a leadership consultant. So besides managing as well a multi-location dental practice. So his commitment to raising the standard of leadership and education across Africa is evident in his devotion to developing and equipping leaders. So as the International Deputy Director General of the Institute for National Transformation, Dr. Magara plays a vital role in nurturing transformational leaders within Africa and the diaspora. Additionally, he holds key positions as the chairman of the board of directors for the Uganda Heart Institute and as a chairman of the think tank Center for Advanced Strategic Leadership, or in short, CASO. So his passion for utilizing Africa's immense human capital is reflected in his well-researched book, Positioning Africa for the 21st Century. So the pivotal role of leadership and think tanks. So this book is also available in local bookshops. And for those who are not in Uganda or in East Africa, you can also find the book on Amazon. So he's married to Lorna and he cherishes his family and is blessed with 4 adult children and 3 grandchildren. So ladies and gentlemen, these are our panelists for today, well-established individuals within, not just within Uganda, but within Africa and the world. So we'll start with Allen Catherine Kajina to give us a submission as the first panelist today and share her experience with us. And please let us be attentive to learn and to hear from her. As she speaks, if you have a question, like I mentioned earlier, please do include it in the comment section. Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Allen Kajina.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. And good evening or good morning from wherever you are. It's a pleasure and it's a real blessing to be here and just sitting and listening to Dr. Laban and Reverend Julian. My goodness, I didn't want them to stop. I think I saw some comments to that effect as well. It's been just so inspiring. So I follow briefly with trepidation and hoping that the comments that I saw coming in the chat section, you will not be dampened by the few minutes I'll be sharing with you, because for me, I've really been blessed. And just a few thoughts, even listening to the two gentlemen and the coming together of the ideas and their discussions, I just realized we are locking into something, or we've locked into something that God is envisioning many people across the continent. The fact that God really loves and is in love with Africa. When you look at the so much attention across the world concerning this not so big a continent, in terms of population, there are others that are bigger in terms of economy and profile. It just makes you think, what is this thing about this continent that God is so excited about, that he would speak to many people across the world and say, I have a heart for Africa. And so for me, who works in government, when I was given this topic, I just felt like, God, help me not to go off what is your heart for Africa. And in the next few minutes from my platform, I just want to share experience and what I believe God is doing from the government angle, from platforms. And this is really just across Africa. It's not just here in Uganda. Things I am picking is, even from this conference, the importance of us knowing the times and seasons we're in as Africans, as a continent. Because it's so easy to miss the times because we are narrowly focused on our needs as individuals, our needs as an institution, our needs as a nation, and going or veering off track from the heart of God for this great continent. So what is God saying? Why is he so concerned about this? And what does he want me to do? So, as I heard the two speak, I realized the need, even for me personally, from what I'm doing now in government, to expand beyond Uganda National Roads Authority and think of Africa, so that with the authority I have as a leader, I can lead God's people into that vision, and that would also lock into that vision. My comments and my thoughts come from the book of Nehemiah. The topic just really speaks about Nehemiah and rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. And when you see Nehemiah and how he was driven into rebuilding that wall, you realize that there was something precious that drove him from the king's palace into the ruins of Jerusalem, and that made him go with his entire heart, leaving nothing behind. He was the king's cupbearer. As it were, he was like the head of the household, the protocol, and that comes with a lot of privileges. He stood before the king. Obviously, the king loved him because the king noticed when he was downcast. But he was downcast for his city. He was downcast for Jerusalem being exposed. And I kind of thought, wow, this guy living semi-luxury, because even then he was still a servant, but he was in the palace, was concerned about ruins somewhere. And that hit me hard as I began to question myself. What is the emotion of my heart when I think about Africa? And what is the emotion of God's heart when he speaks about Africa? Because if I can bring those two together, then I can actually perform the function he has given me knowing that I'm moving with the vision and purpose of God. It just really wasn't about the wall. It wasn't. I mean, the wall, that was bricks and mortar. It was more the identity of God's people who had been captured and taken into exile and lost their identity. Because every time you leave your place of calling to go into another place, perhaps because you've gone into exile, or you've run away because of economic hardships, you lose identity. And he was there in Susa, in the palace of the king, feeling the pain of loss of identity. So what drove him was not necessarily to build the wall. That was just an engineering project. I believe what drove Nehemiah was for God to restore the identity of his people, because the nation of Israel held a special place in the heart of God and in the plan of God, and still does. What is the emotion that drives you as you go to work? Is it the rebuilding roads the way I do? Or is it the heart of God concerning the African people and the African continent and the African identity and the African heritage? Because when Africa was created in the heart of God, it wasn't a dark continent. It wasn't a continent filled with poverty and sickness and disease and coups and deaths and that we see all around us. It's a beautiful continent. And so in rebuilding Africa, in rebuilding the wall of Africa, the wall of Jerusalem, as Nehemiah did, it was to bring back what was precious to God, just the way Africa is. From where I work, it's very interesting just reading the book of Nehemiah, because for me, it's like going to work, because this is what I do. We construct roads, we reconstruct roads, we maintain roads. And this Nehemiah's project was a major reconstruction. There is construction, which is what God did. There's reconstruction, which God is asking us, you and me, across this continent, to restore the condition of Africa to what God purposed it to be when he put us together. When we're constructing roads, just so that I can bring you into my office, into my work experience, when we are reconstructing roads, when we get somebody, let's say either ourselves as an entity, or we procure a contractor to do reconstruction of a damaged road, the first thing they will do is called mobilization. The first phase of any project is called mobilization. They gather resources, they gather equipment, they recruit people, they import all sorts of materials that they are going to use. So they bring everything together to begin the work. I believe we are actually in this mobilization phase of rebuilding Africa. I believe that God is envisioning people like the project we had Dr. Laban talk about, and the incredible work that Reverend Chura is doing, and many, many, many people across the continent. The mobilization of all these wonderful people, all the resources, all the materials that are needed for the reconstruction, the rebuilding of Africa, because God is in the business of restoring the identity and the heritage of Africa. In the recent past, I've attended 1 or 2 functions, and that message comes through again and again. The rebuilding, the restoration, the reconstruction of Africa to what God intended it to be. No wonder we have so much going against us, attacks from outside Africa, even from within. discouragement and coups all over the place, exactly as happened with Nehemiah. So what sort of leaders ought we to be in this season of mobilizing every resource that is required to restore our heritage, to restore our identity in God, even as He intended us to be? I believe the kind of leader that God is looking for is one who feels the burden, who feels the pain, who feels that emotion that God feels on his heart when He looks down at us and says, I do not want Africa to be in this condition. I mean, when Nehemiah felt the burden, he was so downcast that he was not afraid to stand before the king in that state of depression. It was that heavy. No king on earth could replace or could take away how he was feeling. So all of us, whether you're in government or in church or in business, wherever God is mobilizing us, the state of our heart must be the pain on God's heart as He looks at Africa. We must feel, we must hear the call that God is sending out to all of us to come together to build. And unless we have that call, you actually cannot even do much. The energy to move and do anything will come from the pain in the heart as you see the ruins of our continent. God will also show you exactly the state. When Nehemiah was allowed by the king to go and see the condition of Jerusalem, he went alone. He went at night. He did not tell anybody. Sometimes we, in these positions that God have given us, rush out to speak before we see and know what it is that God is saying concerning your workplace, concerning your country, concerning your nation. May God help us to be private people before we are public people, because it is in that quietness, in that private place, that God shares His heart, His secret, so that when you stand up to tell the people like Nehemiah did, you are not speaking from your own understanding, you're speaking from that private place. And may we be the kind of people that define reality. Sometimes we live, a lot of us live in countries or in environments where we whitewash. We don't expose the ruins to those God has given us to use to lead. You know, if you don't diagnose a problem properly, it can kill you. And so we cannot brush under the carpet the challenges that we have in Africa, because God sees them. If God sees them and has not envisioned you with them, how will you ever answer that call? So my prayer is that all of us will understand where we are, that I would understand Uganda, that I would understand Africa, because it is out of understanding it that I am able to do something when God gives me that platform. And every leader, the leader that God is looking for to rebuild and to reconstruct this continent, is the leader who hears, who sees the heart of God. My time is running out, so I'm just going to conclude with one or two remarks. One, that in rebuilding our continent, we cannot do without prayer. In my own experience, I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, both URA and UNRWA, we would not be where we are without prayer. I have no shame or fear in saying that we have gotten where we are because there were people within and without who bowed their knee and asked God, what shall we do? And it's a question that all of us must ask ourselves. God, what shall I do with the office you have entrusted me with? And not only should we be asking God, what shall we do? How shall we do it? Is the next most important question and my last point, because you also asked me to talk about governance. My job as an executive director is not to go on the grader and drive it and dig the roads. There's somebody who does that. My job is to build systems and processes so that these processes drive Uganda National Roads Authority to construct roads. We tend to look at that as, something minor. Systems don't build themselves, processes don't write themselves. And compliance to that does not happen by itself. So leaders who will employ systems that have accountability. I always tell my staff, and they know this, that I am accountable to the public, to the man who uses the road before I am accountable to anybody else, including my boss. I am accountable to the road user before I am accountable to the minister who signs my contract, because the work I do affects them directly. Therefore, accountability is number one. Number two is quality, and quality systems is a different topic altogether. We must have quality systems that allow us to do work that is sustainable. So, in other words, when we have understood the call of God, the next thing is structures, teams, processes, and systems that will allow us to build the continent that attracts others to come and see what is it in that continent that allows the continent to grow, to become the fastest growing continent economy-wise. There are people outside there who have lots of money, but cannot bring it in Africa because they don't see accountability, they don't see leadership. May God help you and I to be the kind of leaders that build our institutions, that build our countries, that build this continent, that it will attract kings to come to the dawning of our day. God bless you.
Wow, thank you so much for such an insightful sharing, Mrs. Allen Kajina. Actually, one thing that I've found so profound is how the different sharings today link to one another. Because what we are learning from here is the need to have an understanding and a conviction for the continent, from wherever we are in Africa, to have a conviction and understand what are the things that we are going through, and from that understanding, be convicted to become change agents. And it goes back to what our two speakers were talking about, having this understanding of and being convicted by the fact that there's a lot of congestion within the urban areas, and the need to move out and build new cities within the rural areas and start new initiatives in real estate, in finance. It comes from that place of conviction, of understanding that, and having a feeling for the continent and having a feeling for our countries to come up with solutions that meet the problems that we have. And so it's really insightful to hear this great teaching from Mrs. Allen Kajina, who actually has been at the helm of transforming some of the biggest institutions within Uganda, Uganda Revenue Authority, through a process of analog to digitization. I saw someone in the comments said, how will we build in the villages and yet no roads are there to take us? So I'm glad Mrs. Allen Kajina is here, who is in charge of Uganda National Roads Authority. We'll be able to take the roads to the villages, to these different places. But without wasting a lot of time, I'd just like to welcome our next panelist, Dr. James Magara, to give us his submission, and thereafter we will go into questions. So I'd just like to encourage each one of us, please do keep posting your questions. We'll be able to pick them out and share them with our speakers. So right now, join me as we welcome Dr. James Magara. Dr. James Magara, you're welcome to speak to us.
Thank you very much, David, and very good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you wherever you are. I have about 15 minutes to share some thoughts, and I decided to put down my thoughts in a slide, which I'll go ahead and share, and then we get going. Okay. I hope you can see that. All right, so I would like to share a few thoughts with you as we talk about the leadership needed to rebuild Africa. I want to share from the scriptures, and then I want to share from what people have studied, because I think they speak to each other. Truth is universal. If anything is really true, then it belongs to the kingdom, because there's only one kingdom of truth. The other one is lies. This is a passage from Isaiah 62, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It says, "For Zion's sake, I'll not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake, I'll not be quiet, until our righteousness goes forth as brightness, and her salvation as a burning torch. The nations shall see your righteousness, and all the kings your glory." We believe God is, this is talking about Jerusalem, but whenever God does a work of restoration, it shines out. And I believe we will see this happen on the continent. I've been involved in praying for the continent for well over 30 years now. But not only praying, I'm also a doing person. It says, "The nations shall see your righteousness, and all kings your glory. You shall be called by a new name that the mouth of the Lord will give." And Africa's name is already changing. It's no longer the dark continent. It's changing very fast. "You will be a crown of glory, a beauty in the hand of the Lord, and the royal diadem in the hand of your God. You shall no longer be termed forsaken, or the land God forgot. Your land will no longer be termed desolate, but you shall be called, my delight is in her, and your land married." Now that is a point I'm making from this passage. The kind of leaders that Africa needs now are leaders who are married to the land. Your land will be called married. And I want to challenge, as I share in a few minutes, are you married to Africa? Are you married to Africa? When somebody has just married, those of you who just got married, or remember the days you just got married, what you felt about your spouse. Do you feel that about Africa? That's the challenge that God is sending out to all of us today. And as I speak, I'm not speaking to when we talk about leaders, we all think about the presidents, the CEOs, the pastors, the apostles. No, I believe all of us are called to lead in some way. And so this message is for everyone. It says, "For the Lord delights in you, and your land shall be married." It's said there twice. Your land shall be married. How do you marry a land? "For as a young man marries a young woman, so shall your sons marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you." Today, we see a scenario where we see these terrible images of people dying in the Atlantic, or rather in the Mediterranean, but there are so many other ways people are dying to get out of Africa. When you've just got married, you're not dying to get out of that marriage. So God, one of the things we need to be working for and praying for is that we will marry the land. We will marry our nations. You will marry Kenya, you will marry Nigeria, marry South Africa, put your nation there. Are you married to that country? What is the feeling of your heart? That came out when Alan was speaking, Daman and Kajina. One of the other speakers also talked about the passion, the feelings you have. What feelings do you have? So leaders who will lead us to destiny must have that. And if you're going to be one of them in whatever way you lead, doesn't have to be at the top level, you must pray. If you don't have that feeling, that love, you need to ask God to put it in you. When you marry a land, you'll not mess it up. You'll not abuse it. You'll not litter it. You'll not talk ill of it. You protect it. Even when you're married and your spouse has faults, when people are talking about the faults out there, you protect her. Are we married to the land? Then I'd like to bring another passage still from Isaiah. It talks about a king that will reign in righteousness and princes will rule in justice. And those are two things that are key in fulfilling what God's mission is: righteousness, justice. And the question is, are you exercising that where you are now? And this is not just for big leaders, this is for everybody. In your home, in your workplace, are you living in righteousness? Are you exercising justice? It says, and it shall be a hiding place from the wind. This is a picture of somebody who is protecting. When the wind is so hard, you go to a hiding place. Are you that kind of person? And a shelter from the storm. When there are storms, do people feel safe being around you? Like streams of water in a dry place, that is refreshing. Are you a source of refreshment? If you're not, then you need to ask the Lord to make you just that. Like the shade of a great rock in a weary land. Our continent is weary. It needs leaders who will be a shade. Are you that kind of person? And you, all of us have, if you can afford to join this meeting, you have some place of leadership. At least you have some knowledge on how to handle gadgets. You have some education. You have some leadership somewhere. It may just be small in a home. You're the eldest child in the home. Are you the shade of a great rock in a weary place? Can the younger brothers and sisters come and hide in your shade? Then the eyes of those who see will not be closed. And that's the picture we have had. People who see, that we can't see, no vision. The ears of those who hear will give attention, they'll listen. The heart of the hasty will understand and know, and the tongue of the stammerers will hasten to speak distinctly. Messages will come out clear, no double speak, no diplomatic double speak. It says the fool will no more be called noble. These are the results of having those kind of leaders in place. Or the scoundrel said to be honorable. There are a lot of people who carry the title honorable who are very dishonorable. That picture will change when, as we rise to the place of leadership in every sphere, not waiting to become the big boss, but where you are now. That's where it starts. It starts where you are before God promotes you. Yeah. It says the fool no longer be called noble, or the scoundrel said to be honorable. So it's not only in the now. There were times when in the past, in Isaiah's day, when people who were scoundrels were called honorable. For the fool speaks folly, and his heart is busy with iniquity, to practice ungodliness, and to utter error concerning the Lord, to leave the cravings of the hungry unsatisfied, not caring for the people in your care, and to deprive the thirsty of drink. While as for the scoundrel, his devices are evil. He plans wicked schemes to ruin the poor with lying words, even when the plea of the needy is right. And he who is noble plans noble things, and on noble things he stands. So the challenge here is that we must be aiming to be this kind of people. And this is a clarion call for everyone on this call. Please don't put it in an envelope and post it to your member of parliament, or post it to your president, or to your CEO. This is a message to each and every one of us. Sometimes when we hear messages like this, we're thinking about those other people God is raising. No, God is raising you. Now, I'd like to spend the rest of my time very, very quickly unpacking a book I'd recommend for you. I've read it, and I just want to let them speak what I want to speak. These are two men who you may have heard about, Cousins and Posner. They wrote a book, one of the greatest books on leadership I've read. It's called The Leadership Challenge. And they did a study, and they came up with the conclusion that what people are looking for in a leader, people will willingly follow this kind of people. It has not changed over time. Their study has taken 3 decades, are coming to 4 decades of study. And they've come to the conclusion that everywhere they've gone, and this study was done on all continents, and they came out 4 things, whether it's in Africa, in America, in Australia. There are 4 basic things that we all look for in leaders. And this is universal, so it must be coming from God. They want honesty. It doesn't matter where people are. They want a leader who is honest. Are you honest? Are you honest? Somebody who's competent. Are you good at what you do? If God has called you to whatever field you're in, are you striving to be the best you can be? Inspiring. And somebody who is forward-looking, somebody who's hopeful, somebody who's forward-looking. And this has not changed. It does not change. It's something that is innate in every culture. They did a study which went through countries, cultures, ethnicities. That study still goes on the internet. And it's all over, millions of responses. And the same things come up again. These are things. And interestingly, another group of people did a study called the Global Leadership and Organizational Behavior Effectiveness, GLOBE study, which also studies in over 150 countries of the world, more than 500 researchers. They came to similar conclusions. So I just want to unpack these very quickly. And then, because this is the challenge now, we've heard about buildings, initiatives, starting things and so on. What does it mean for you? So 5 things that they 5 practices which they concluded. They interviewed with a very basic question: what are you, where you like at your best? And they interviewed people in leadership, and this is what they found. People, when leaders are their best, they model the way. They inspire shared vision, they challenge the process, and they enable others to act and encourage the heart. And in the next few minutes, I'm just going to summarize what these things are, because they're relevant to us, and they're relevant to, Reverend Julia talked about doing. We've done prayer, talk about prayer. I've been involved for prayer for a long time, and I still am involved in prayer. But God is now emphasizing doing a lot more. Both hands, praying and doing. With Nehemiah, they had a weapon in one hand, the brick on the other hand. The weapon is prayer. The brick is what you're doing. We need to be people who do both. So how do we model the way? 1, we need to have clear values. And as believers, our values are espoused in the Word of God. These have to come out strongly, not hiding. And then we set an example. Set example. That's how we model the way. People will follow those that they are credible. No one will believe we are serious until they see us doing what we are asking them to do. Could give examples here, but there are no times. Deeds are much more important than words. We all know it. Doesn't matter how much people speak. If they don't do what they're saying, it's just a noisy gong. So wherever you are, whether it's in the home, you establish principles, you live by them, you set an example. Secondly, a shared vision. People are looking for leaders who are hopeful, who see the future, and they are hopeful about the future. There's been a certain amount of despondency in the church, which God is lifting up now. Doom and gloom and end times, and the Antichrist is coming and so on. God is lifting that away. God's kingdom shall reign over all the earth, and we need to be people who believe that. If we don't, then we'll not be spreading hope. And we need to get visions. As people who pray, God can envision us about the future. And we begin to inspire people. And then draw them around a common vision. Brother Pastor Laban has been rallying. His story is really amazing, how he moved out there during lockdown. That was the greatest time for him. They built a lot during lockdown, and inspiring people to go to places, that they have never been, and to do new things. All of us are going to be called to walk that journey in some way. Some with greater mandates for leadership will do it in a very big, visible way, like Reverend Julia and Julia is doing, but there are others who will not be heralded, they'll not be sung, but the principle is the same. Seeing and receiving from God new possibilities, and inspiring others to join you. And then challenging the process. That is not being afraid to start out, to do new things, to do things in new ways, being willing to experiment. When you experiment, you'll make mistakes, you take risks. This is a time for risk-taking, not just wild risk-taking, but risk-taking in obedience to God. There is no way you're going to follow God and you don't take risks, because without faith, it is impossible to please God. Without faith, it's impossible. That's the journey of the heroes of faith, and this is our day. This is our day. All of you, if you want to see God at work, just know there will be times you're going to walk and take a risk in obedience to God, not a wild risk, but God has told you something. Sometimes circumstances are contrary. We need this kind of people, not people who are comfortable in the boat, but those who are willing to step out. When Jesus says, come, they step out into the storm, like Peter did. That is, the people who are willing to pioneer. That's the kind of picture that we need. And I'm talking to each and everyone here. Don't put this in an envelope and post it to anyone else. God is talking to you, that you need to have that kind of quality. And number 4 is enabling others to act. You cannot do things on your own. You cannot. There is no way you're going to fulfill God's plan for your life yourself. So learning to work with others, collaboration, building trust, facilitating relationships. You know, when you look at how Satan fell, Satan had a private agenda. He had an ambitious private agenda. I will be like the Most High. I will ascend. Look at Isaiah 14. There are 5 eyes there. I will do this. I'll ascend. I'll be like the Most High. I'll set my throne. It was all about me. God is calling for collaboration. No one can do things by themselves. And the quicker we learn how to collaborate, how to bring others around us, the more effective and faster we will see God's purposes fulfilled. And as we bring others around us, we strengthen them and enabling them to, to develop competence, encouraging them, allowing them to make their mistakes. Leadership is a relationship. No one has ever gotten things done by themselves alone. Even David, who slew Goliath, the rest of the Israelites had to finish off. He couldn't finish off the army by himself. So whatever God is giving us today will not be as visions, will not be done by just us. It will be done as a team effort. And the final point is encouraging the heart. And that means recognizing contributions by other people, showing appreciation by, for people who do well. It's not all about me, and being able to reflect appreciation when things are done and celebrating what others have done. Maintaining that spirit of community. We need that very strongly because for a lot of the time, the church has been very competitive, not just combative, but very competitive. And there is no need for that anymore. For us to succeed, our destiny is joint. It's corporate. It's corporate. So these are the kind of qualities. I've used the scriptures, being married to the land, righteousness, justice, and this is common research. It's out there. The book is called The Leadership Challenge. I encourage you to read it. It's a great book on leadership. Great book on leadership. It's actually been called the Leadership Bible. Very simply written, very, very powerful with those 5 principles out there. And as I conclude now, I just would like to quote from the book where they say that the notion that there are only a few great people who can lead others to greatness is just plain wrong. How true that is. How true that is. Likewise, it is wrong to suggest that leaders come only from large or small or already great or new organizations. They talk about organizations, but sometimes we think it's tribes or certain classes of people, or from established economies or from certain industries or functions or disciplines. The truth is leadership is an identifiable set of skills and abilities that are available to anyone. So God is calling us to leadership. We can learn. We can unlearn things that we've known. We can learn new things. We can learn new practices. That's the journey we are called to. It will take a great number of leaders to cause Africa to arise. Some will be at the very top of the mountain. Others will be at the base of the mountain. But every one of them will recognize they are called to lead. May you be one of them because God is calling you at this time. God bless you.
The world is sinking, but Africa is rising. It's time for Africa to turn the tide of political conflict, economic uncertainty, and moral decadence. The time is now for Africa to arise and rebuild. Inspire E-Conference 2023 will give you the tools and strategies to be part of Africa's rebuild. Join us online this August from Monday the 7th to Saturday the 12th from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. East African Time as we gather the brightest minds across the continent to discuss the rebuilding of Africa. Book your slot today and be part of the movement that will change Africa forever. Africa, arise and build.